evening from that corner in the Northeast, the land of reverence and colonialism. This is Dark Hour Paranormal. Folks, thank you for being patient. We had a few technical difficulties to sort through. Of course, that seems to be the running course for certain things, but at the end of the day, we get through it, we're here, and so are you. So with that being said, I'm going to hold this intro down. We're going to get right into this because we're a little late, sorry, but we're better late than never, as they say. First of all, welcome all of you that are here. I see some new faces. Thank you for joining us and tuning in here. We have a great show for you today. I don't know if Jim Goodall will be joining us. We did send him the link and he was aware of what we were doing. He may be busy. I just haven't heard back from him, but regardless, he's got the link. He might be popping in. If not, we will do an entirely separate show with him as I had planned. For some time now, but I'll let you know when that happens. In the meantime, I do have the one and only Jared Murphy here with us today, and we are going to be speaking about Belize in depth because you guys have heard my voice on this subject to a certain degree. Now, Jared essentially is the spearhead of the operation that we're working towards. Without giving too much away, I can at least tell you that he is that momentum behind what we are doing in a very large way. I'm going to bring him on because, we've wasted a little bit of time here, unfortunately, dealing with the technological end of things. But you know what? That's how it goes until it doesn't anymore. So, folks, I'll introduce to you some of those who have not known him or not met him and not seen his work. He's author, by the way. He's written a book called It's Not Us. It's wow. It's not us, it's aliens. No, it's not aliens, it's us. Jesus Christ, it's hot in here. Forgive me. We just went through a hell of an ordeal to try to get this up and running. All right, so Jared Murphy, here we go. Jared, how you doing, my friend? Wow, that was a rock start, but hell, we're here. Sorry about it. Thanks for coming. I know that you have been through hell and back, and that may have begun even before we got out to Belize, but I'd like to, hear your voice quite a bit today in regards to what we were doing there, our experiences, what may have happened when we came home, and where we may be going in the future in regards to some of these efforts. Sir, I give you the floor.
Hey, well, thank everyone for being patient, and I'm definitely grateful. I have not done this for a while, and there was ironically, it was not me, it was mysterious technical issues. So thank you for everyone for joining. And yeah, this is my first time talking. For those of you that don't know, yes, I wrote a book called It's Not Aliens, Worse It's Us, Discovering Our Lost History. There is a new version coming out. Everything, including Belize, got put on hold, for those that don't know. On Memorial Day, to crown that date, I went and had it's not so much a heart attack as in a full cardiac arrest, which I've been educated the difference is that my heart stopped. I had a 100% blockage of what's called the Widowmaker, which is what it sounds like. It successfully kills everyone but 1 in 1,000, give or take. About 20% live, and I'm in that group. So here I am after spending 17 days in ICU and 8 days in a coma. And I'm actually just short of a month out of ICU. And everything's going great. Everything's going brilliant. No, I didn't think I was the guy who was going to get this kind of a attack. It's a good thing that I wasn't in Belize. We did a number of expeditions to areas that were at least an hour and a half by boat from anywhere, let alone the hospital, which was only a few minutes. Well, it was across the street from where we stayed. But had this happen anywhere but from where it did, the blessing on the timing is that I was very close to a very brilliant hospital system called HCMC, and it's a learning hospital, experimental hospital, and a very big heart hospital. And I just happened to be 5 minutes from that location. So I checked out not knowing what happened. And no, for those of you immediately wondering on the Dark Hour Paranormal side, did I experience light or see anything? And I'm going to tell you what some of you will know. For this quote, I was mostly dead, but I was still alive. So I don't think I saw things. I'm going to chalk it up to that they had me on oxygen and they had me on something called a Lucas machine as I was taking my last breaths. So the reality is, I don't think I was quite dead. I think they were able to keep me alive. And yes, apparently I tried being dead a few times because my heart stopped, and they had to use the paddles on me about 7 times, and at maximum. So I have a bit of burn mark on that on the chest, and they broke 4 ribs. But the reality is that I was still alive for most of it, I think. So no lights, no memory. The last 2 days prior to the event, I don't remember. And then one day I woke up in the hospital, and somebody had to tell me about 100 times that I had had a heart attack. And after the fentanyl dialed down a little bit, apparently I remembered things for about the last 5 days. That was the short. And I know it's something that a lot of people are aware of, but I wanted you all to know that I am doing really good. I don't recommend it as a weight loss program, but I am down a significant amount of weight. I'm almost back to like high school weight. And now I just gotta, I've lost some muscle, but I'm in a full rehab program and things are going really good. And the plan is to go back to Belize, and we are working out. I don't know. There's a lot of exciting things. Where do we start, Michael?
That was a great place because, we're looking at the culmination of certain efforts, certain stresses, and of course there may be hereditary factors that go into the experience that you had coming back. The timing is absolutely unbelievable because, like you said, we were in Belize and trek out to the properties that we were checking out initially, 16-mile drive by boat. Okay, so it did take some time to get out there, 16 miles back, and that was just getting to the edge of the jungle. We would then troop in 4 or 5 miles, depending day, whatever it was. So very fortunate that you were able to come back here, settle in, and it happened when it happened in the proximity to that hospital and so forth. Again, there's got to be some synchronicity here that we're just not seeing yet. But as worrisome as that may be, I hope we got the most of it out of the way, at least in terms of a negative sense. So when we decided to go down to Belize, we had some information on a particular area that we were using satellite imagery.
Yes.
To locate certain anomalous places. So the team that we were working with at the time, was up on this as well. Unfortunately, as we went through the experience, some of these people were a little less interested in the actual work of, doing the archaeological end of things, making those connections so that we could move forward in certain respects, whatever they may be. But initially, we had a team of about 10 or 12 people that were ready to come down with us?
We did, and it overall went swimmingly well.
Mm-hmm. Well, for the most part, I mean, up to the point where we got there, divisions happen, and I've talked a little bit about it. It's not a matter of, I'm upset with somebody or whatever. It's a matter of interest in how that diverges back to certain intentions when you get into the environment, and that's okay. But that is, I suppose, what we started to work with. All right. Where did you start on this trip? Like, where do you feel comfortable talking about the beginning of?
I think there's some. Well, I think for everyone listening, I think we should do a broad overview, which includes yes, we went looking for new Mayan ruins. Mm-hmm. We went looking to verify that our satellite imaging was working. That we identified 12 potential targets in an area that no one else had been. But then, of course, we also have made a relationship where this is early on. No one's ever heard this. For you guys listening, you will be literally the first to know that that Michael and I and Jim Goodall are working out a relationship where we are going to be excavating likely a pyramid and a surrounding possibly metropolis or village or town that are of, possibly the oldest ruins in Belize. And what's relevant about that, and one of the things we found, one of the things you guys know we all talk about is ancient megalithic, so large stoned, pre-dynastic, pre-Mayan, pre-Olmec, pre-Toltec. We're looking for those societies that started like at the pyramids in Egypt. We're looking for that society that rose, built very complex, what we think are likely machines, or not just large constructions, but we're using ley lines, earth energy, Tesla stuff. And then they were abandoned. And then, of course, we have later the dynastic Egyptians and Olmecs and Toltecs and Mayans, and finding what are likely thousands of year old abandoned ruins. And what's one of the first indicators, whether it's Peru or Belize or anywhere else that we know it's megalithic, is the size and the complexity of some of the stones. Most of the dynastic people did smaller stuff, but there were also small polygonal blocks that are multi-sided. And I think one of the things to just mention to everyone is that you and I stopped with one of the curators of one of the established ruins. And for all those of you who are about to go on a trip, I would take this advice also. If you don't need it, great. But part of it is the very humble and simple, like what you might think is just someone taking this simply your money to get a ticket to go to an established ruin. What we found, what Michael and I found, was that these were frequently the directors of the site, and they knew everything. And in this case, you and I went to a site, the one where Jim went and carved off a good portion of one of his legs. And we'll tell you about that. But we were able to talk to someone who had been managing and working at the site for over 7 years. And this was a site that had a megalithic block. It had a multi-shaped sided block that was on the backside of one of the pyramids, obviously reused probably by the Mayans themselves, but not something maybe they were responsible for. And those kind of unique finds I'm suggesting also that when you go to known ruin sites, or you guys are on a trip, you'd be shocked as to what you will find out that are not known by the locals and by the local managers. And just don't assume that the person taking your ticket is just a ticket taker. And may ask some questions. I think you and I spent 45 minutes talking to him about the ruins.
Yes.
About at Louboutin. And
yes.
And then it wasn't right away, but then he started opening up and making suggestions. And you and I got to go see a megalithic shaped block that we never would have known about if we hadn't taken the time to truly be in awe, maybe, and actually ask the appropriate questions of someone who he made a point to even say, he's like, many people come and they buy a ticket from me and I let them through, but they don't ask any questions. And he said he didn't understand why you would come to a site like this and not ask questions. But he was so humble about not saying anything. But this was a good example of some of our group ran ahead, and you and I took advantage of this man's knowledge base, and we were able to find something that did connect Belize. Obviously, you guys can see pictures of Belize and all the different famous sites, but there are megalithic blocks, there are polygonal constructions, and Belize, like Guatemala, like that whole Central America, is just filled with pre-Mayan, Olmec, Toltec, possibly ruins that were adapted by these cultures in hundreds or thousands of years later. And we're looking at working at a site that's close to 2,000 years old or maybe older. And so it's all really exciting. I've jumped around a little bit and I haven't been able to look at the comments. So where are we at?
Very quickly, you mentioned some of these stone structures. There's a little bit that I can share with you guys in respect to the footage that we have, just a little bit. I'm going to show you one of the walls that we saw at Louboutin, and you'll notice that the blocks themselves are sort of falling away from each other, and this is under the weight of the earth and the vegetation that's grown above them. So let me see if I can pull that up very quickly here. It's a quick clip, but you get an idea of the texture when you're looking at some of these, very large structures and how they appear today. Let's see here, share screen. Boy, I haven't done this in a while.
We're like rusty.
So, as you'll see as this loads up. All right, so already you see these things starting to protrude a little bit. Clearly, at one point in time, they were much more flush with each other. But yeah, take a quick peek here.
Yeah, I mean, there's really good stonemasons within the periods of these, of the Mayans, of the dynastic work. I mean, there is good work.
I'll play that one more time. time.
And these are blocks for most of you watching. These are blocks that dynastic people can work with. It's a lot of what you'll see in Egypt. You know, they work with mud brick, and the construction is so much different from ancient megalithic work, where they're working with what kind of machines or what kind of tools to lift and move and fit together extremely well. Much larger or complex sided blocks. And a lot of what we saw was definitely Mayan work, which is fine. But these are the first locations that people as we know it in the last 12, 13,000 years since the Younger Dryas that we think of as, oh, well, these were the most advanced cultures, when in reality, they're likely cultures that survived cataclysms, and they ultimately came across ruins that they then mimicked in their own way. Which, there's so much to talk
the curious
about.
Thing that I realized go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's a little bit of a lag here. That's my fault for talking over. But just to point this out, one of the things that I learned and didn't realize is that when archaeologists have gone to some of these sites, and you look at Louboutin, which is what we're seeing now, a very famous excavated site, down there in Belize. What we don't realize is that some of these had to be reconstructed. Some of these structures had to be put together again by the archaeologists in a certain measured way.
Yeah.
And, there was a picture, a before and after picture, Jared, that you had sent me a little while ago. I don't remember the name of the site, but maybe you do, wherein, in the early 1900s, obviously was completely filed over with vegetation. And as they've excavated it up to this time, you now see these little structures that are in different places that you don't see in the picture prior to. But yet this was probably the accurate positioning for some of these structures. I just found that fascinating.
Yeah, it was Teotihuacan, and they took almost 100 years to take it from a dirt mound into, well, it was more protected early, it was abandoned. I mean, it also had the stones. I mean, they're making arbitrary decisions, well, educated guesses as to where to stick these stones. But these are rebuilds, and they're just putting them where they think, well, this looks close enough or good enough. And the technologies maybe to put the stones back exactly where they were sitting, or some indicator as to how we would know where these stones would fit together. We don't have that technology yet. So they're doing their best, but at the same time, it's years and years and years, and they're going for low-hanging fruit, like a burial. They're looking for items that might look good in museum. So holistically, there just hasn't been an interest, or whether an interest or not, there just hasn't been the manpower and the wherewithal to excavate it more extensively. Because from where Michael just showed you those pictures, that's the top of something that we essentially went as, about a city block. We climbed up dirt to get to that level. So that's not the pyramid. That's an upper platform plaza that's on top of what's still a buried stone work that they put these other pyramid caps on. So we're looking at the top, not the sides of the true scale and size of the construction. And both Michael and I would look over the side, because some places are so steep you would just not stop. It'd be very Princess Bride. You would just fall and maybe be okay, but roll a lot. But it was all stone.
Jim.
Yeah, right. So Jim Goodall, our friend and colleague, a storm came. Michael and I were filming, and a lot of people don't know this, so I don't think we've shared this publicly, but Michael and I were filming stuff that you'll all eventually see in a docudrama. But the reality was, it was pouring raindrops the size of, they were punching you. They were huge. And the storm came on, and we tried to hide under palm trees. And
it worked for a minute.
Yeah. And then, some of our group, including Jim, he started making his way back down the staircase, only just like Jim, he decided not to take the stairs and was taking the grass down the steep side of the buried section of this monumental site and managed to slip and gash about 4 inches off of peeled back his skin about 4 inches wide, and like made one hell of a rip in his skin.
He had a incision on one side of his leg, and he had a puncture wound on the opposite side of his leg. So there were 2 separate wounds within this guy's fall, and he fell twice. We didn't see him fall the first time where he incurred, the injuries that you're mentioning now. I mean, I happened to be right behind him as he fell down like the last 3 steps and was caught. Thankfully, but I had no idea the extent of his injuries at that point. Now, one of the curious things was that one of the guys that the group that was not with Jared and I had stumbled upon apparently was a park ranger, and he was kind of giving me detailed tours in respect to what was there. And this is, when the storm opened up, they decided to head back to the visitor center, which is right at the bottom of this site. So in that endeavor, obviously Jim hurts himself. We convene underneath, the roof, and maybe it was Jared, the other members said, "Hey, can you go back and, grab any first aid, medical supplies that you have?" And to which the ranger said, "Oh, sure, no problem." So he ran back, and we're going through stuff. Well, we had some gauze, some tape, a few Band-Aids, whatever, and washing out Jim's wounds. And this guy comes back with 2 dirty Band-Aids, one maybe half ripped out of the package. I mean, I admire the effort. It was probably all they had, but my God, that wasn't even close to it. Jim might as well have just eaten the Band-Aids at that point. That's what they were worth. I mean, considering what he had gone through. But, as he says, and he'll tell you himself, he sacrificed, some blood to the Mayan gods, and hopefully that would bring us some fortune in the future here. But I don't know that it did. Regardless, that's what happened with Jim.
Yeah, and the site, we were out in the actual jungle doing, absolute virgin territory that no one had explored. Some British map surveyors had come through about 100 years earlier, but they weren't there to find Mayan ruins. And the ruins where we were looking were an area that was extremely, it was jungle, and we had bushmen with us that were quite brilliant. And I'm pretty much the real life Rambo, and was able to cut our paths through the jungle, and we were able to explore the 12 targets that we had identified on the virgin land. But the idea of going to Nimli Punit or Lubitan was to see these other Belizean ruins that, for those that don't know, in the bottom squeeze of Central America, you have Belize and you have Guatemala, and they are really at one of the narrow points. So if you were trying to go between the Atlantic and the Pacific, the area that we were exploring for the new land was, and these sites, Lubitan, Nimli Punit, the site that we're looking at, doing some work at and fully uncovering, that area is smack dab in the middle of the Mayan Empire and on the way between coasts at the narrows of where you would go if you really did have a ship on one side, because there's no Panama Canal at this point, right? So this is a very interesting area because it's a very high traffic, dynastic area. And the fact that we're looking at working with Mayans to excavate at a site that has had limited excavations at 20, 30, and 40 years ago. And now we would be the first people to do anything extensive and a large scale project. It's very exciting. We want to tell you guys about it to a point, but then, we can't talk about it fully yet, but it's smack dab in the middle of the oldest, what's known to be the oldest Mayan ruins. So we're talking 2,000 years or more. And that is going to tell us
that span, do you recall?
Over 300 acres. And we're looking at starting with 27-ish acres for the largest pyramid area and surrounding potential city or town. We would be, bringing it back to life, bringing it back. We would uncover it first. We're not going to rebuild it. You saw the potential With the destruction of trees, roots have done a terrible thing to the ruins. We don't know what condition under the dirt. Right now it looks quite a bit of it looks like a hill because it is completely covered, and we don't know what we're going to find once we start removing the vegetation, trees, and soil. It could look as rubbled as what we just saw. It could be in better shape. We aren't going to know until we dig into it, and we're hoping to do that within the year.
Which is very significant, because a lot of times when any sort of operation like this tries to get its feet off the ground, there are a lot of steps, quite literally in that respect, that it needs to cross to climb up to a certain point where we can break ground. But in the conversations and the connections that we have made, it seems that this is the path of least resistance in respect to this creativity. And what we have in mind is beneficial to all, to such an extent that preservation is really the goal here in a lot of ways. I mean, aiming to keep that preservation, not only of the culture, but the ancient history that was there. And again, when we talk about a lot of these sites, we'll just attribute that the Aztecs built it. They lived there, right? It must have been Aztec, or it was Incan, or it was Mayan, not realizing that as Cortez came over and was, getting friendly with the Aztecs in the beginning, he asked them, how did you create pyramids? And they said, we didn't. They were here when we got here. So many civilizations could have utilized these sites just the same way that we look at America's Stonehenge with such a crooked eye, because we have evidence of multiple cultures coming in and utilizing that type of site. And I believe that for some of these larger sites, that's indicatively true based on the evidence that we see as we go forward with what we find. Now, the site that Jared's mentioning.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as we walked into the site that Jared's mentioning, strewn along the way, as it's partially excavated, there are stelas, there are dolmens, there are all different kinds of, blocks that describe certain pictures and hieroglyphs. There's a Mayan calendar at the bottom of the hill. It's a little rough, of course. It's worn, weather worn, but it's there. You can see it. So it's incredible to know that there were cultures that utilized these sites as a whole, and yet there were peripheral usages of those sites throughout history from cultures that came before and after some of the predominant evidence that we find in respect to those people.
Yeah, there is, for those of you who, I'm just going to say the word crystal skull. For those of you that are in the know, the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull was found in not this exact ruins, but well within the parameters that say that this is within the vicinity. Also, there have been crystal jaguars. There have been other crystal artifacts, but the Mitchell Hedges skull was found in this area. And because of the other crystal elements, when I know one of our comments from Kevin was about what are we going to find? Well, I'm not making any assumptions about what we'll find, but there are whatever period of Mayans that were either in possession of an older, maybe the crystal skull is an older piece of technology. Maybe it's just period, but we are well within, again, the oldest ruins in Belize. We're well within the possibility of finding whether or not another crystal skull, but crystal artifacts and some of the most interesting artifacts that predate the Mayans. This is a site that, just to get your imagination or your ideas spinning, this is a 300-acre city with 3 pyramids, and we're starting in the middle. And there is a lot of things that we could find, but I thought you guys would find that interesting.
There are also cave systems up in that area that have had artifacts pulled from them. And I think in one case it was a canoe fully intact that was stored in one of these cavernous areas. And, while what they describe these cavernous areas to be like, it's probably not the place I would like to go. Give it claustrophobia.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to send somebody in there who doesn't mind splunking with a camera, to check out, the alleyways and so forth. Very quickly, third phase of moon is in the house. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. And I'm sure you're hanging out with our good friend Apala, who is also a panel member. So hi, Apala. Good to see you as well. Thanks for coming by, guys. This is, something that everybody in our camp has been very acutely aware of, certain respects of what we're doing. And as we go through, you folks may see some of this intermeshing of creative energies within our camps convening to create something much larger in way of vision and scale than perhaps one person can do alone. So that's all I'm going to say in regards to that. But thank you, third phase, Blake and Brent, for coming on by. I appreciate you to no end. Very good friends of ours, like brothers to me. Well, Jared's also like a brother to me as well. That's just the indicative of the closeness that we share in respect to what we do over through these channels. It's not just about the channels, it's about the lifestyle, it's about the dissemination of certain information and the passion for the research and the truth that we're all after, but some with a little bit more gust than others. And that's why I'm with the ones that have more gust, because you have to match those energies. Sorry, I didn't mean to get you off track, but I wanted to acknowledge.
No, Michael's on a roll. So there's
well, they said here we're just scratching the surface, and you know what?
Well,
we and we're just talking a little bit on the top soil here, if you will, kind of touching down underneath. We're barely at the tip of where we're headed. Go ahead, Jared. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, this is really exciting. For those, again, I don't think it's too early to say that what we're ambitiously taking on truly is something that's never been done. We're not looking to do this in 20 or 30 or 50 years. We're looking at uncovering this area and creating many, many thousands of data sets and doing it maybe in 2 years or 3 years, and not rushing, but dealing with each burial or item that we find, but creating information that can be shared online, filming and recording for shows that you can watch. We have inner city use. We have our friend Wayne from Michigan UFO Sightings that works with the Detroit school district. So imagine, it could be any school system, but can you imagine a kid that maybe can't afford or go with his family on a trip like this or see some established ruins, but imagine that Michael and I and Jim are able to bring a program which Wayne wants to work on, where we can take the satellite imaging and they can learn spectral sciences and physics. Meanwhile, you have a kid who's looking to dream and be somewhere, and maybe it's not just an activity or being an artist or sports, but be able to have a hunch, and for us, real time, to share with different classes around the country that are in junior and senior high. They might have an instinct about, we would share some of the LiDAR imaging and the satellite imaging, and we might be able to show them in real time and part of a weekly educational program that what they find may be real, that they themselves from their classrooms may be able to participate in the work that we're going to do at this site, and be able to be inspired by their own work, and not just have the hope that one day they'll go to a school and learn something about being able to go out and do something, but they'll actually be able to do and participate with us remotely. And that's something that's part of this. So not only are we bringing jobs and doing something to bring people a site that isn't just partially cleaned up, but entirely cleaned up. And again, you'll be able to follow along on episodes, because we will hopefully be able to get some help and get it recorded and filmed in a way that you would all enjoy that, but also bring these programs that we're talking about for everyone to participate. And even online.
Somewhere and being a part of an archaeological expedition down in Belize or somewhere else close to the equator, having an influence in respect to what you see visually in front of you, that you could pinpoint something at whatever age. And then we have able-bodied people out there working that land, so they're going to dig there as suggested, and sure enough, you find something of significance, whether it's a structure, whether it's an artifact, whether it's a cache of something else. The amount of gratification to somebody who doesn't necessarily have the opportunity to go out there physically, like Jared's saying, and do this is overwhelming, I think, in the most positive of senses. And this is just one small avenue that we have in mind for what we would do with this type of effort that we're describing and being a little bit ambiguous on for a certain purpose. It's not necessarily that under contract we can't talk about certain things, but think about how energy works in various ways. And without going into large detail, let me put it this way. I think there was a philosopher who even mentioned, don't tell your plans to your friends. Okay, before they're hashed out, before they're fleshed out, sorry. Don't express that energy. Let it build up, let it spiral into that ball, and then start rolling it, and then people will see it. At that point, there is no stopping the momentum in terms of your creativity. You're not letting that energy go first, right? So there's a bit of that goes into our decision of what we can share, but of course we want to present some of what we had down there in the most professional manners. And if it's up to us, at the very end of the day, this isn't going to be on YouTube. And I've mentioned this several times since we've been back. I've thrown out a couple platforms as possibilities, but the point of the matter is this: we want to do something more comprehensive and bring this to a larger audience, because we feel deeply that the interest and passion will be there for people, that people want to see this sort of work, and perhaps in the future have an opportunity to be involved themselves one way or another.
Yeah, and so it's a lot of effort is going on for what I'm working on and what we're working on together to finalize the scale and scope of what we're doing. And for everyone listening, I mean, we started with what are we going to do? What did we do? And it was fun, like when to take research that we spent a lot of weeks on, a few months of prep, to identify targets, to work with a private landowner, and to identify ruin sites. And it was very exciting because our first day out, we did find a site that was being archaeologically, it was thieves stealing, and they had been working for months. But again, the property is very large. And for us to have identified that day one, it was pretty much like going up to bat in a baseball game and have bases loaded, and your first ball and your first hit is a home run. And it was pretty exciting that the first day out of our 2-week adventure was to locate, after getting through the bush, a site that had been mined and worked for weeks with some clandestine thieves. And that was pretty impressive for us to locate.
Uh-oh. Hang on, Jared. We're losing that audio again, as we were experiencing prior to, as it was sort of fading out. So now I can't hear you. Why don't you just pop off, come back in? I'm going to show this quick video. It's about 20 seconds long, and it's really just walking through the woods there. But go ahead, pop out of the studio, come back in, because that seemed to help before. I don't know what's going on that end, and we've been trying to figure out. This is what we were experiencing prior to the show, as you could hear him getting softer and then fading out. Stupid technology is not on our side today. But while Jared takes care of that, here, I'm going to pop you out there, and when you come back, I'll bring you back in, Jared. Right. This is an individual who I will withhold his name for the moment, who was basically our guide through the thick and thin of the jungles. And what you're going to see here is me walking behind him. I tried to stay right by his side for the majority of the time we were in the wilderness, because, obviously this is the guy who knows where he's going. And what you'll see here too is, if you look at this tree that's to the right of this gentleman, you'll notice that there are some notches there. Okay. So what would happen is, as we're going through, he would, have his machete, and he's cutting certain foliage as we're going forward. He would notch a tree here and there on each side of the path that he's creating. And this was, a guide marker that, he was able to find his way back if, all else failed. Now, curiously enough, there had been excursions out to this property that he was a part of, within the years past. And, this was at the behest of the property owners. So it was really just, it wasn't an expedition. It was just him and a couple guys, if you will. And some of the notches, what they would do is they'd take a bit of tree branch. And I do have footage of this that you'll see in the presentations. And they would insert this into the notches, and it would actually grow into the tree. So quite fascinating the way that they were navigating, but very old school in respect to grounding and nature and the understanding of how to navigate through these woods. So very quickly, I'm just going to play this for you. And again, it's just us walking through the woods. It's not even close to the thickest of jungle that we ended up having to traverse through. That came a little bit later, probably in the second week, where it was just walls of 10-foot razor grass and then everything else in between that you can possibly imagine, stretching for meters into the jungle, wherein, I mean, it would take you so long to, kind of get through some of this. So here, I'll play this very quickly, and then I'll bring Jared back on, see how that works.
You've never seen this path, have we, Hector? Have you ever gone this way before? Yeah.
This is the easier part of the travel. And even though you're going through the woods this way, we're talking miles at a time, wherein, we're trucking through and we're getting through that jungle. Jared, give us a test.
Am I here? No. Can you hear me now?
No, nothing, eh?
No. Boy.
Yeah, as Jared is kind of playing with that, I'll keep talking about that experience there. Having
Yeah,
that
let me
guy
know if you
was
hear me.
imperative, because there were many times that I wouldn't have been able to gather my bearings when it came to where exactly we were in relation to where we had come from. Not to mention that if something had happened out there, as in Jared having a heart attack, that was it. There's nothing.
Hello.
Nothing anybody, could do. We're so far out into the jungle. We're so removed from society and any sort of civilization. It wasn't a matter of walking back to where we needed to be. So there were several instances where the motor would go out on us, and thank God we had a backup, because if we got stuck out there again, we're out there. There's no way to even contact anyone to come and get us. No cell service out there whatsoever. So, you want to talk about an intrepid adventure? That's what we were on, to say the least. What do you got?
Am I there? Not there.
Nope.
Not there.
You hear him?
We're gonna have to.
Stephen A.
We're gonna have
says
to wrap.
they hear you.
Oh,
which is odd,
interesting.
because
I think this is a StreamYard. I think this is a host thing.
Strange. It's all right. They can hear you, Jared.
So
Why
if
don't
you guys
continue talking a little bit? I'm gonna play with my end then, I guess.
Well,
that's strange. All right. Yeah. Just stick on. Yeah.
So to Michael's point, yeah, I mean we're looking at, it's very interesting. We were only late coming into this podcast because this seems to be a StreamYard sided issue. But yeah, there's it's very interesting. Maybe the movie version of the jungle, like Romancing the Stone or Indiana Jones, is very interesting, because sometimes the jungle had some fairly clear areas where it was pretty okay to walk. You're just walking through a field of leaves. And there were other areas we haven't really gotten to razor grass. It's exactly what it sounds like. Well, can you? Oh, you can hear me now. Yep, you can hear me.
Oh yeah, I gotcha. Yep.
All right, so we'll work that out next time instead of doing this. Hey, welcome to our first podcast ever, and don't know what we're doing.
It's only been 3+ years. That's all good.
Yeah, so hundreds of podcasts, but the razor grass can grow 7 feet tall, and you just have to lightly brush it, and you will get cut. And it's quite spectacular to head through the jungle. And ironically, there was quite a bit of razor grass, and it was pretty much a few miles in. And our first day, where somebody looked at somebody and said, "Where are all the bugs?" There were no bugs. There was no mosquitoes. There was nothing. It was.
But I still have.
It was very sharp.
Razor grass.
Yeah. So. Yep. Yeah. Well, Michael was a bit of a badass and I think did some of it with no shirt on, but that costs extra for you guys to see. So he,
Patreon.
I don't know how he was doing it, but Yeah. Some of that razor grass, and it's thick. It's not like a few blades here and there. It can, and what's interesting is you saw our guide, he did it in a dress shirt and had been doing it for 40 years, and he could cut the razor grass. He did all of it, barely broke a sweat for most of it, and never cut himself. And we were running in and impaling ourselves on sharp plants and razor grass. And it was ridiculous how dangerous. Yeah. So I'm glad I didn't have a heart attack out there, but it didn't mean we didn't all bleed, because I think we all bled a little bit.
There was a point where, we would take rests occasionally or periodically as we went forward, because you needed to do this in the immense heat that we were under. It was oppressive to a point where I can't even illustrate that through language. Okay. That's how it felt. And our guide, being as versed as he was, he would just sit down in a pile of razor grass, and it wouldn't affect him. It wasn't like he was rolling around in it, but he was sitting right in it. At certain points, you're so exhausted and you're so focused on your heart not popping into your mouth and, drinking that hot water that continues to boil in your camelback, that you sit in that razor grass too. And that's what it is. It's a secondary concern to, being hydrated and getting some shade, because there were times we were out there, Jared. I mean, that last, March of Baton, basically going through the jungle, that last day that we did was a 5 hours out, and, coming back, there was no shade for a very good portion of that. And it was just absolutely.
We had heavy packs. We all had heavy packs and water bladders and bags. And the reality is we were not just carrying ourselves. I think everyone was carrying 20 to 40 plus pounds of gear. Easily. And we were coming and going with 4x4s. We had all terrain Jeeps, and we were able to get a lot further than a lot of people. And I mean, if we want to think about anything, it's imagine being back 1900, 1890s, doing this with, granted, they carried tents and all their supplies and cooks and food, but doing this permanently to head out into the jungle and not return until you find Machu Picchu would have been quite a thing. Just throwing it out for imagination's sake.
Well, there were a couple of targets that we weren't able to get to, and it's a matter of time, because once you get out there, you're moving at a certain pace, right? And the thicker the jungle, the slower you're going, obviously. But sunlight, as much as a helpful entity as this can be, sunlight, you're on a time frame here. So when you get out there and it's half the way through the day, you might have a few moments to explore whatever you decided to get to, knowing that you have now another half-day trek back, and you don't want to get stuck in the jungle in the dark. It's just not something you want to, involve yourself in, for various reasons that I'm sure all of you can imagine. Even if you're versed in that area, it's just not what you want to do. There are cats out there that are enormous, and I'm talking like footprints like this. Okay. Yeah. So it's like a small elephant track, but it's a cat track. You really certainly don't want to be out there with some of those apex predators. But nonetheless, this is something that you have to plan for, not only before you go out, but while you're out there, given the fact that whatever plan, I don't remember what the limerick was that we were going by there, but you make plans and you plan to see them change, right? It was said more gracefully.
Belize time. On that it was Belize 30.
Yeah.
Well, there was.
That's a whole other story in and of itself. But yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you don't plan anything out there too much don't plan on meeting at 3:00. Just
you'll get there when you get there, and if you get there before anyone else, you wait for them.
Yeah,
they're going to do the same.
Could be an hour, could be 20 minutes, could be 2 hours. Best to not.
That's too funny.
It's definitely there's a mindset change when you're in Belize, but bringing this to everyone and starting with just a little bit of what we did, where we went. There's a lot to tell you. There's thousands of photos, tons of video. Mm-hmm. We are going to work that into some things for all of you to see in a more coherent way. This is really more like coming off a trip and being able to tell all of you guys, hey, we're excited. We think you should be excited too. Here's what we did. And so despite audio and video issues, I hope this was a little bit of that before. I think what you and Michael and I will bring you guys more photos and more details on podcasts. But I, of course, was highly not functional for, well, the coma really cuts into your talk time. And then ICU doesn't do you much better. So here we are.
No, but the fact that you went through what you went through and made it out, to the point where you're now up and walking and a very steady path to recovery is nothing short of a fucking miracle, my friend. And, even your doctors, I think, have expressed as much using that same verbiage,
Yeah, pretty much. They did. Because 1 in 1,000 live, give or take.
It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And, when I heard the news, it was so devastating. I mean, I was rocked for weeks, trying to get in touch with, the appropriate parties and so forth, as many of us were. I mean, there were a lot of people that checked in on Jared as you would, with a close friend or a constituent of this type. So I want to thank all of those who were there, supporting Jared throughout all of this, and not only Jared, but supporting the people around him that were supporting him, that needed a shoulder here and there to work with. It was a wonderful convening of all of these energies and all of these people for the purpose of, Jared's life, and, giving him that morality and that energy to just keep going forward. But again, at the end of the day, it's really on Jared, and he pulled right through. Thanks. What I want to show you here in this picture, and Jared's right, we have a lot of pictures, we have a lot of video to go through and do certain things with, but there are a couple of things that I picked up that didn't necessarily have to do with the trip immediately, within archaeology that I caught, and it's just sort of fun thing. So what you see here, this is the site that we are going to be working with, and this is in one of the more developed areas that was excavated. That's as much as I'll tell you for now, but it's a little difficult to see. But there's a spider right here in the center, and this little guy caught me by surprise. I was, kind of looking down to my left, and I saw out of the corner of my eye the leaves moving, kind of like somebody was kneading them. And immediately I thought, oh, that's probably some sort of little spider, or maybe a mouse or something like that, kind of doing this action, because bugs are more erratic and they move, and the brush does the same thing as a reflection. This guy was probably about this size, okay, and I wasn't getting any closer to him, but it was cool to see the wildlife out there. And yeah, Jared was right, there weren't really many bugs. I wasn't bitten by mosquitoes all over. I had that one little spider that decided to piss me off, but I seem to live through that. But outside of that, that's it was very what's the word I'm looking for? Unexpected, not to see as much of that wildlife as we thought we would. Although there were a couple of anteaters that had crossed the roads, and capybaras that were banging around. Yep,
we saw caution signs for panther crossing, or cougar, but
commonplace, right?
I mean, you don't often see you see a deer jumping caution sign, but it's weird to see like a panther or they had those. Well, they're not anteaters, but what did you just say? There was that
capybaras.
Yeah, so they had signs for caution because this is where they cross, and so we never saw a panther, but they definitely had the caution signs. We were definitely in that neck of the woods, and besides that spider, which by the way I never saw, and I'm in my flip-flops, so I want to reconsider the boot program. Yeah, and I brought boots, but I ended up doing most of it in my Jerusalem cruisers.
Great term, man.
Yeah.
I don't think, if you said it to me before, it didn't hit me that way. That's great. I like that. Very quickly before we go, I think I've shown this to a handful of you that have watched Goof On. I may have shown it on this show once, maybe twice. I don't remember. Now, you can't take anything out of Belize that involves artifacts, relating to any of the cultures that were there. It's illegal to take a Mayan artifact out of the country. But what if it wasn't necessarily a Mayan artifact, but came from a shell pit that was basically a trash dump, right? Where they eat their food and they, suck the snail out of the shell, throw it over in the pile, and that's where it goes. That's not technically an artifact the way that one would, find a stone carving or, something along those lines. This is a petrified, or almost petrified, conch shell that was identified by our guide as being utilized and eaten by the Mayans through clay pots that they had created for the sake of this meal, but also to create salt coming from the ocean water, the brackish waters. And long story short, as I've mentioned before, they would create these pots. They'd place their meal inside of this. It would boil, and then they'd break. So the pots were created as a vessel to cook this stuff, and then they'd scrape the salt, and that's how they would get some of the salt. But this is about 1,200 years old, between 10 and 1,200 years old, this particular shell. Absolutely fascinating. I wish I could have brought back some of those pottery shards, but I'm not going to take any chances when it comes to that. And not just because of the Belizean government, man. I don't want anything else etherically looking at me in a sideways direction. And I'll love to
dig yourself out of this hole.
Back. Yeah, let's not go that route, because for whatever it is, as I mentioned, we both dealt with enormous struggles since we've been back from Belize. But there seems to be a writing, there seems to be a balancing that does come out of this. We're now in that neck of things, thank God. But we all went through some shit. Yeah.
We have a lot more to show you. Yeah. No, we have a lot more to show you, a lot more to do.
Tell us where we can find you. Give us an idea, if you can, when that book might be coming out, the revision, or at least in respect to approximation. Hit us with something, man.
In the last 4 weeks, I have getting out of the hospital. I'm looking to release the new Not Aliens, hopefully in the next, at the rate we're going, probably in the next month or two. And the work we're doing for Belize, that's ongoing. But I'm still at notaliens.com, Not Aliens on YouTube, notaliens.com. I apologize to everyone, and members particularly. I do appreciate membership. And for those that those donations are very well spent if you join. And I will be updating that site, but I've literally, been off my feet quite literally until the month ago. And well, a month and like another day, because you guys can all know Memorial Day is the day that I had my incident and my cardiac arrest. But yes, please visit notaliens.com. Now, my third year doing a lecture at America's Stonehenge. Because of my condition, I will not be able to go this year. I will not be able to leave my rehab, but maybe we can do a virtual one. And so that will be hopefully forthcoming, and the book also in the next couple months. It was a long time to revise and rewrite, and that was it's been a long process to revise the book and to update it. And so I hope all of you could grab a copy of it when it does come out, and I'll still be signing them again and everything else. But for now, definitely look to notaliens.com. There's still some great stuff there, lots of great video. And if you've caught up on most of it, that's awesome. But there's a lot of hours already out there, and there's some wonderful photos, and there'll be more coming. So thanks again for having me on, and for everyone joining.
Thanks for, staying alive, first and foremost.
Yeah.
Of course. No, really, it is absolutely wonderful to see the path that you've taken after this incident. And God, we all had the highest hopes and stayed within our optimistic bubbles. And sure enough, maybe that helped a little bit. But regardless, this is the result. You're here with us, back on your feet, moving forward, not at high speed, but you don't need to. Getting things done is the most important thing. And that's what you've been doing, Jared, since you've been able to do it. I mean, there was literally no pause in breath between the time you came out of that hospital and, hey, let's call the people that we need to. We were already on top of this, and you're, very much appreciated for those efforts. And believe me, you folks are going to see the extent of those efforts very soon. Not only with what we're talking about here, but, we have the Montauk documentary that I'll be going down, unfortunately, for the same reason. Jared can't join us physically, but, I will be doing lives down there as, connection permits. And, believe me, Jared will be included in that journey one way or another, because, this is something that we've been working on together. And we also have a couple other things dealing with archaeology for another documentary, or at least a presentation that we haven't released yet, that we will get to eventually. But there's probably about 3 or 4 different projects on the table right now, some with a little bit more weight and gravity than the next. But, the focus will go where that gravity intends it to be. And believe me, you won't want to miss this stuff. All right, Jared, I'm going to take you off for now. I'll close out the show. Thank you once again, my friend, for coming on. And believe me, we're going to be seeing Jared again soon.
Thanks again, everyone.
Cheerio, right? That's what they say. Look, this was wonderful. Yes, we have a couple technical issues that rise every once in a while, and then we'll get through those, and that's fine. Right now, if that's what we've got to deal with, that's what we've got to deal with. I'm not going to continue to put certain things off because of the technology. I'm just going to move forward. If it's really that bad, then I'll just take the show down, I'll edit it, and I'll put it back up. I've done it before, I'll do it again. That being said, it won't be a focus. Again, we're just going to keep moving forward and get this stuff done. Now, if you are in the Massachusetts area, come November, I will be speaking at a Paracon up in Salem. If you're interested, let me know. Tickets are relatively cheap. I think it's between the 11th and the 12th of November that I'll be up there speaking more or less on the subject of the paranormal, but I will bring in other peripheral aspects that tie together in respect to Black projects and, sacred geometry and, certain things around this type of ilk, if you will. Yes, email me for details if you're interested. I'll send you all the pertinent information that you need. And we're gonna come back next week with another show, and I won't let you know who it is just yet, but it's gonna be a good one. Let's see if we can get Jim actually next week, in addition to what I'm mentioning now. Stephen A., you know what to do, brother. If you're interested in coming and checking this out, let me know. It's going to be a big event. There are a bunch of speakers on and I'll send you that flyer if you're interested. Again, just shoot me an email. And one last thing, for those of you who do email me, sometimes it takes me a little while to get back to you. I know I've mentioned this before. I have an inflood of inquiries and, resolves for certain projects that we're working on, different people that we speak to on different levels. Bear with me. I will get back to you, and God help me, if you don't hear from me in a month, just shoot me another email. I'll be right on top of that, especially if it's the second time you've reached out and I missed you the first time. I do apologize, but I just wanted to put that out there and make that clear that I'm always making that effort to be in contact with those who make the effort to do the same. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And if I've missed you and haven't gotten back to you, just shoot me another email. I'll get right back to you immediately, given that being the case. All right. So in the meantime, stay vigilant, stay explorative, and of course, continue to seek that truth that we're all part of and ground it right where we stand, because that's what we're going to continue to do as we move forward, backs held high, spines rigid, in conviction of what we may find. Folks, until next time, what do they say? What was it? Oh, that's right. Ciao.